Good morning, everyone. Happy Youth Day to everyone. Thank you for waking up so early and joining us today on your holiday. My name is Maddie, representing the Marine Conservation Group, also known as MCG of the Nature Society of Singapore. And so, could we have the first slide, please? Yes, so the NSS is a non-government, non-profit organization, and we work to foster the awareness and appreciation of nature and to advocate the conservation of these natural spaces here in Singapore. Today's event is organized by the Marine Conservation Group known as MCG, one of the many interest groups that NSS has. The MCG was formed to encourage understanding and protection of marine nature in Singapore and Southeast Asia. The MCG's activities are focused on increasing awareness and limiting threats to the marine ecosystem. MCG conservation projects include endangered species monitoring activities. For example, the Horseshoe Crab Rescue and Research Program, which began in 2007. This 14-year-old initiative started as a conservation effort to rescue the horseshoe crabs entrapped in deployed and abandoned fishing nets at the Mandai mudflats. It then evolved to basic research to improve our understanding of this little-known ancient mariner, the horseshoe crab, which is actually as old as the dinosaurs. Over the years, we have students from primary, secondary school, junior colleges, tertiary institutions collaborating in research and rescue on the Mandai mud flats. This activity is a real immersion in muddy hands-on and legs in the mud and out of comfort zone search and if necessary rescue work. Okay, so can I have the next slide, please? And besides the Horseshoe Crab program, other activities that NSS organizes include guided nature walks, bird watching, butterfly watching, and workshops as well. Some of the activities are open to the public, but some are for members only. You can join the NSS as members to enjoy more special activities that are open to members only. Some of our members are also families with young children and have joined us in many of our conservation efforts and programs. This is a very meaningful way to lend a hand in our conservation efforts and learn new things together as a family. Okay, the next slide, please. Yes. Yesterday, we had 3 very interesting and enriching sessions on seahorses, sea stars, and sea anemones. We believe the young audience, our young panelists, and the marine scientists enjoyed these sessions too. In this event, in conversation with young marine biologists, we run a series of sessions on different marine topics, and today, the marine scientists and their young panelists will be talking and sharing about giant clams, sea turtles, and sharks. And before we commence our session today, there are a few Zoom tips that I want to share with you. So you will notice that everyone here is muted by default. If you have any questions, please type it in the chat box below. Attention it to Q&A. Okay, so type it to Q&A, okay? Do turn off your videos as well unless you're speaking to help us with the bandwidth. And you might find it easier to follow us if you switch to speaker's view, and you can find it on the top right-hand corner of your Zoom window. At the end of the session, we will have some time for Q&A. So if you have any questions for the scientists or for our panelists, please type them in the chat box below. Okay, so if you move your cursor to the icon bar at the bottom, the icon for the chat box will appear. Okay, lastly, this session will be recorded and uploaded into our YouTube channel after this session. Okay, now to the main thing. Today we have 4 young panelists, and first up we have Tiana Ho, who is 9 years old from CHIJ Our Lady of Good Counsel. Tiana has a strong sense of adventure and loves to constantly explore new things, especially everything about the underwater world. Tiana, can you unmute yourself and say hi? Yeah, that's Tiana. Okay. She's fascinated by life underwater where animals have unique abilities to breathe and survive. She looks forward to learning and becoming a certified scuba diver so that she can join these amazing marine animals and explore their underwater world. Tiana took up taekwondo at the age of 5 and she's currently holding a junior black belt 2nd level. Okay, and the next person we have is Wang Xingyu. Xingyu, can you unmute and say hi?
Hi.
Yes, hello, hi. She's from Marymount Convent School, And Xingyu is an aspiring young scientist, as her love for science allows her to constantly learn new and interesting facts about the Earth and how we can help protect our planet. Science also taught her how not all marine animals are fish and how they are the second largest group of animals. She was fascinated to learn why it feels slippery to hold a fish in her hand because of the thin layer of mucus that can be found over the scales. And next up, we have Justin Lim. Justin, can you unmute yourself and you say hi?
Hello.
Okay, good job. Justin is 14 years old and he's from ACS Independent. Justin is a passionate Liverpool football fan who enjoys both playing and watching football. What he finds most interesting about the marine environment is how all the different types of animals are able to interact and thrive in this wonderful, complex marine ecosystem. And finally, we have Samuel Lowe. Samuel, can you unmute and say hi?
Hello.
Good job, Samuel. So Samuel is 7 years old from ACS Junior, and Samuel has a love for the oceans and its animals. He loves how the oceans bring him a sense of calm and relaxation. He enjoys taking walks in nature, climbing, and listening to audiobooks. Recently, he started learning about carnivorous plants and how to grow them. Ooh, wow, that's very interesting. And okay, next up, we have our moderator. Our moderator for today is Dr. Neo Mei Ling. Dr. Neo is a marine ecologist working at the St. John's Island National Marine Laboratory. While pursuing her degrees, she became inspired by the many local conservation workers and took a strong interest in marine conservation issues. Through her research, she found her favorite marine animal. Can anybody guess what it is? Yeah, Samuel, do you know?
Giant Clams.
Very good. Yes, and her big dream is to build up marine conservation awareness in Singapore and elsewhere through science communication. She believes that science can be used to change people's mindsets on environmental issues, but science also needs to be relevant and relatable to people. That is why she strives to make science accessible to people through collaborations, engagements, and science communications, pushing the path to use science to generate societal impacts. When not doing research, she actively volunteers with Team Seagrass and Reef Friends to promote marine conservation and educate fellow volunteers. During her free time, she is also an avid diver and a photographer. And I will now hand the time over to Dr. Neo.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mandy, and really nice to meet everyone and the panelists. Hello, Samuel, Justin, Tiana, and Xingyu. So I'm looking forward to having a nice conversation and discussion with you. So before we begin the discussion itself, I'd like to briefly introduce myself and also what roughly I do. Without going too much detail into the organism of interest today, which is the giant clam. So give me a moment to share my screen. But also a very good morning to everyone else who's here with us, friends, and also young faces as well. Good to see you all. So, right. So, I am. So thank you, Maddie, for the kind introduction. So I work. So my work on marine research and marine conservation issues is predominantly in Singapore, but I also do a bit of work outside of Singapore, particularly in the Southeast Asia region. So some of the countries include Malaysia, Indonesia, as well as Thailand, and many other collaborators around the world as well. So one of my favorite animals as well as interest is the giant clam. So you can see the word here, calamity, is basically playing on the word itself, calamity itself. So what I am striving to do in my research is to make sure that it won't be a calamity in some sense. So how do I go about doing that, and what exactly am I doing? So this is really just a very quick run through of like the different hats that I wear at work and outside of work as well. So formally, my title is a senior research fellow, but I'm actually a marine ecologist. I'm also sometimes called a marine conservationist. I communicate science, so I see myself as a science communicator. I'm also a mother. I have a young girl who's 2 years old, who I'm very proud of, and I also am trying my best to teach her the different things about the environment that she sees around her as well. My own major source of motivation of why I'm doing what I'm doing today is Mother Nature itself. Having spent a lot of my early childhood days around the coastal waters in Singapore, you can see this is a very old photo of me and my family swimming off Changi Beach. And I think Changi Beach has recently been in the news, if some of you have noticed or even have visited yourself as well. So growing up in, being immersed in the environment itself made me really want to find out more and be able to do more about this, or to learn more about this environment as well. So it's really what started me on this journey is really curiosity. And I think many of you who are here are definitely also curious, like what exactly is about the marine world? What exactly is also about the different animals that you see, and what do they actually do, and what kind of roles they play in the marine environment as well. So I started, before I even started on studying marine science, I actually volunteer as a young a young person with some of the veterans that we still hear and see today. So this is Miss Ria Tan. Some of you who might be have done some of your research or might have used her resources to basically look up for information. Her Singapore fact sheets are very, very popular, not just among the young people, but also among the young undergraduates, university students who are studying at the university as well, using it as a major resource to find out more about marine organisms in Singapore as well. So I had the privilege of joining her on one of the first field trips that I had in 2008. That's almost 12 years, 10 to 13 years ago. My math isn't very great, so that's also one of the characteristics of a biologist, I would say personally myself, not very great at math. So this is me very young. I don't know if I still look the same. Some of you might think I look the same, but this was taken almost 15 years ago when I was a young undergraduate student in the university. So this is me and my friends on the very first field trip where we actually saw my very first wild giant clam in Singapore. So yes, to answer one of the first few questions or possible questions that we will be talking about in further detail is that Singapore does have giant clams. So we'll find out more about where they are. We'll ask our panelists where they are later. So a very quick overview of what giant clam is. So the name is very unique, right? Giant and clam. So we know the word giant itself means it's very big, but how big can it go? So we'll find out a little bit more in a bit. But I can tell you right now is that they are the ocean's largest living shellfish. So there are no other animals as big as them. Of course, there are others, but they are the largest invertebrate species, which are species with no spine, living in the oceans today. So a bit of the scientific part of it. So you can classify them into two different genera. One of the genus is Hippopus, and one of the other genus is Tridecna. So these scientific classifications are important because it helps us to differentiate what we're seeing in the wild as well. And being able to differentiate the species in the wild also helps us to better understand them very specifically. So for instance, some of the characteristics and traits and things that you're very good at are very specific to individuals, just like you and me. So I'm good at something, but you're also good at something. So that helps us to differentiate and classify or categorize in that sense. So that is why we have some of these scientific names. These animals are very unique. They actually share a very interesting relationship with symbiotic microalgae. So symbiosis itself means that two different animals will share a relationship in a way that it benefits each other. So in this particular relationship, the giant clam benefits by having this microalgae. And the word algae itself is, gives you an idea that they are underwater plants, or one of the types of aquatic plants that can also photosynthesize with sunlight. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in more detail. But essentially what I like to share is that these animals are solar powered. So as long as they have enough sunlight, they can grow, they can eat, and they can live happily ever after in some sense. And finally, they are also very interesting animals to me because they can live quite long. So, in terms of the lifespan, some of the lifespans that said is, can be up to 100 years old. That's pretty old for, big clam like this. But I think in general, some of the scientific evidence showed that the longest confirmed living individuals are about 50 to 60 years old. So it means that these animals, having lived on the reef for so long, they actually see what's happening in the environment as well. So being able to study them gives us an idea of how have the coral reefs or how has the marine environment changed with time. And these are very important information for us because we want to know, has the environment changed for the better or has it taken a worse turn? So this is my food with a local giant clam. This little individual can be found residing in Sisters Island Marine Park, which is an area where it is mostly protected against poachers and people who used to have the opportunity to do intertidal guided walks will be able to see this little young one there. So hopefully you all will have that chance not too long from now. So my research itself, I look at spawning and reproduction. So what does it actually mean? So basically, I try to make giant clam babies in the lab. So how do I do that? I need to collect the sperm, which you can see me here looking at this jar of water that you can't quite tell where is it. Is maybe it's somewhere there or not. And I also have to collect the egg separately. So I have to basically have both the egg and sperm and then put them together so that they will fertilize to become a new baby giant clam. So that has been my work for many years and we are still doing it for today. So what do I do with these baby giant clams? Sometimes I think to myself that I am definitely a marine ecologist, even though I'm just wearing this baseball cap and then looking at just containers of water that I don't quite know what I'm looking at sometimes. So what I also do, I don't just do spawning and reproduction work. I also do field surveys. I look at clams in the field. I do guided field trips as well. And I also spend a lot of time toothbrushing and brushing my baby giant clams in the lab. So that's something that most people don't quite realize is that as a marine biologist, I don't necessarily always go out to the field, but I also spend a lot of my time squatting in the aquarium tanks, just brushing these giant clams and making sure that they don't have bad stuff growing on them. But I also spend time doing science communication. I spend time with my little girl and as well as also with many different citizen scientists who has been very helpful in my work over the many years also. Oops. So very quickly, I monitor giant clams in Singapore. So I find out how many of them are around in our waters. So this is just a very quick overview of like how I monitored one individual from 2008 until 2018 when we saw her die because of some of the natural events that happened in Singapore. These are some of my other research interests as well. So I not just do giant clams, I also look at many other aspects of marine biodiversity and the impacts that human cause on the marine environment. So this is a little bit more of a try of like kind of putting things together of how I see the different work or different aspects of my work contribute towards marine conservation. So you can see some pictures here, including the giving talks, doing surveys, some a little bit of a complicated chart right here, which is looking at the relationship of the species using DNA today. So I hope that my training in marine ecology itself, as well as being able to do many different things, has helped to sort of move the information and knowledge towards marine conservation and management. So basically, what I'm hoping to try and achieve is that I hope that our coral reefs don't look like this in 2020. But unfortunately, there are some of the coral reefs looking like that because of some of the major natural events that's been happening around. But many of us are still keeping positive and also hoping that our work will be able to contribute to understanding why these things are happening and is there other things that we can do about it. So a very quick thank you. I'm happy to flash this slide again so that you can see my email, but I just wanted to do a quick shout out to the different organizations that have been supporting my work over the years. So with that, I am going to stop my sharing right now. Give me a moment to close my slides and pull out the questions. Okay, so our panelists ready for this morning? Yes, I see Justin, I see Tiana doing a little bit of nod. How about Samuel and Singy? Are you guys good? Up? Yeah? Okay, it's really nice to meet y'all. But before I maybe go into the very difficult questions, I like to just ask y'all very quickly. On my screen, I see Samuel first, so maybe Samuel can unmute and tell me what made you choose to join this particular session today. And it's a question for everyone, but I'm just going to call out the names. Samuel.
Because I like giant clams.
You like giant clams? Okay. Can you tell me one thing that you like about giant clams?
That they can walk.
They can walk. Okay. Maybe you can share with us a little bit. So now you've started a little bit of an interesting conversation. So can you tell us or tell everybody today, like, how does a giant clam walk? You can give an example, like, how, like, is there something, other animals that move like them as well?
Crab.
So you think a giant clam moves like a crab as well? Like this?
Yes.
I think more accurately, I would say that, the land snails that you see, the snails, especially nowadays it's been raining a lot. So a giant clam actually moves pretty much like a snail, where there is a very big foot. They have a very big foot underneath their shell. And the way they move is really like a snail. It's like they will extend their foot and then pull their body towards the front of the foot as well. So if you've seen how land snails move, that's how a giant clam moves as well. And they do take a long time to walk, for a long distance. But the smaller ones can walk faster than the bigger ones. So thanks, Samuel, for starting this very interesting question. I'd like to move on to the next person on my screen, Justin. A quick one. Why do you choose today's session? And we'll see how it goes.
I think because like last year I was also doing this thing. Then I was quite interested in giant clams, but then that day I wasn't free, so that I didn't get to do giant clams. So then now this year got giant clams. So yeah, I found them quite interesting also.
So can you tell us one interesting aspect that that made you want to join us this year also?
Like one interesting aspect about the clam, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I think, yeah, it's just the sheer size of the thing is quite cool, because usually, like, the clams are so small you can just eat them, but this one is like 200 kg and it's like 1.2 meters. Is quite big. So yeah, it's cool.
Yeah. If you don't mind, can I ask you, how tall are you now?
I'm 1.59.
Wow, okay, you're even taller than me. So basically, so in the audience also, you can imagine, if you're about 1.2 meters tall or you're about 1.5 meters tall, that's pretty much how big some of the giant clam, one of the particular giant clam species can grow up to. So thank you, Justin, for sharing that as well. But I want to follow up something as well. You were saying that they can grow so big compared to some of the smaller ones. Like, how do you think they can grow so big? What make them so unique that they are so much bigger than most of your typical, like you say, food clams, edible clams?
What? That one I'm not really sure.
Okay. Yeah, so I just to sort of give everyone an idea also. So earlier on I mentioned that they are quite unique because they can make their own food. So in most of the clams that we eat, like for example mussels, some of you might have heard lala, or the cockles, as well as oysters. These are some examples that you've seen in your supermarket. They don't have that same function. They can't make their own food. They cannot photosynthesize because they don't have that special friend living in them. unlike the giant clams, they actually have this special friend, which I mentioned earlier. They are microalgae. So imagine that if our skin have this algae and we can photosynthesize, that means we don't have to eat. But can you also imagine that in terms of growth, you can actually, that's almost like unlimited growth, because as long as you have enough sunlight, you can grow constantly or grow continuously as well. Of course, we are not seeing giant clams growing bigger or beyond the size that we see today, because there are also other processes that needs to be balanced out. So they not only have to make food for themselves, but they also have to defend themselves. You know, some of the behavior like closing the shell, all these need energy as well. So even for ourselves, when the food that we eat, we don't necessarily grow bigger, but sometimes we need it to maintain our own health and body functions as well. So this is just a very quick sort of overview why and how they can grow so big as well. So thank you, Justin, for getting this started also. I see Tiana. I think Tiana's also ready, or you unmuted yourself. Could you share a little bit, why do you choose the session, and also one interesting aspect that you find for this particular animal?
I like giant clams
You like them? So what do you like about them?
because they can live up to so many years.
So why is it that it's interesting that they can live so many years? Like, what do you think is good that they can live so long?
Then they can live longer. Then they can like spend most of their time. I don't know,
What do you think they spend their time doing?
finding a mate.
No, that's a very good. That's very good as well. Yes. It's a good answer, and it's a good response. So being able to live long enough in the environment allows them to have that opportunity to find a mate. I just like to ask you, do you know how they find a mate? Like, did you manage to find out more about how they reproduce?
No, but all I know is that they release their sperm.
Mm-hmm. That's what you found out just now. Okay. So we can share a bit more. We can expand on that as well. So these animals are so big, right, Tiana? Then do you think they can move? I mean, Samuel said that they can walk, right? But when they are so giant and so big and heavy, do you think they can still move?
I mean, they can move, but it's just that the shell is making them move slowly.
So if they move so slowly, then how do they find a mate? How do they find how do they find another friend, or how do they find another mate to reproduce? You want to make a guess?
Oh, I don't know.
Anybody want to guess? Samuel, Xingyi, Justin? I heard somewhere.
Like they can produce the female egg and the sperm like together and then release them.
I cannot.
Yeah. You want to share a little bit more, Xingyi, so we can hop over at you over to you as well. Like your set. Why do you choose today's session, as well as also we'll talk a little bit more about the answer, the response that you gave.
Because I find giant clam very interesting.
Right. So I'm hoping that you found that their reproduction is interesting. So you mentioned just now earlier that they can release the female eggs and the male sperm, and then somehow they are able to reproduce, right? You mentioned that. Yeah. So does anybody know like whether a giant clam is a male or female? Like, how do you tell whether it's a male or female?
It starts with a male, then it becomes like an organism that can produce the male sperms and the female eggs.
So basically what Xingyu is describing is that this particular animal, right, when you see them, they actually have the ability to produce both male sperm and female egg from the same individual. Yeah. So, but it just depends on how old they are.
You ask me to go away.
It depends on how old they are at that time point, and whether they can produce either one of them. So to answer Tiana's question on how do they actually meet, so in the open ocean, and many of the ocean animals as well, they rely on the ocean water and currents to bring things around. So you can see it as your ocean currents are like your highway, like where where we drive our car, but this one no car, but basically the larvae, the egg and the sperm would be traveling on this really fine currents, and then somehow they will be able to meet each other. So it's like how we drive from point A to point B, we'll be able to meet each other. But in the open ocean, it's very it's left to a lot of chance, it's left to a lot of fate, whether they can meet each other or not. So that also brings me to the next question on this is also one of the reasons why they are challenged and threatened in our marine environment, because because if there are so few of them, the chances of them meeting each other, not physically, but the chances of their babies and the egg and sperm meeting together becomes a lot lower over time. So I'd like to also just quickly ask, maybe I just ask Samuel. Samuel, what do you think is also challenging these animals? Like, why do you think I said that there are so few of them in the wild now?
Because people eat their mussels and also hunting them.
Yeah. So would you eat a giant clam, Samuel, if you happen to have the chance to see them, and do you want to eat them or not?
No.
You don't want to eat them. What? So maybe I can ask you just very quick one, like why you don't want to eat them?
I want to protect them.
Okay. So thank you, Samuel, for that answer as well. I saw a quick hand from Xing Yu. Do you want to add on something?
Oh, but then they produce like 500 million eggs at one time, and then some predators can eat the eggs. So when they produce more eggs, it has a higher chance of survival.
That's right, Xing Yu. I think you raised a good point as well on predation. So in the natural environment, where there's so many other different marine animals, right? And in the water column, even though they are very small and microscopic, but you also have many other predators of that size that can potentially eat the babies of the giant clam. So predation is one of the problems. Samuel also raised a good point. People eat them as well. In case you are wondering, there used to be giant clams sold in some of our restaurants in Singapore. Maybe before your time and also before my time, when I was still a young child and never really visited a lot of restaurants in Singapore. So around in the 1990s, some of the giant clams were actually sold in the restaurant as a special dish. So they would cook them, they would cut them up, they would cook them, and they would put them on the giant clam's shell and serve it to the customers. But shortly after, when the authorities realized that, oh no, these are actually protected species under some of the laws and regulation, so these animals were quickly taken off the menu. And since then, we never know about this anymore. So it's actually part of a natural history part of Singapore in that sense, in case some of you are wondering, and in case our panelists are wondering as well. So yes, we have traditional communities that used to fish them here. But although they no longer fish them in such great numbers, or maybe they don't really eat them anymore, it is still considered a threat as well. Just before I move on, actually, that I see someone raise hand. Can someone help me if I should jump in to address the hand raise or raised hand? Can someone from the NSS side? If not, then I'll continue with the panelists. Anyone?
We will address those questions later.
Okay, Ken. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Maddie. So we have already answered quite a few questions, and I just wanted to quickly touch on something that Xing Yu mentioned, not on threats, but also on the the potential to produce that number of eggs, 500 million, right? Do you want to make a guess? Or any of us here, do you want to make a guess like how many of that 500 million will survive in the wild? Maybe I give it to, okay, I let Justin have a quick thing. I see him thinking very hard. Yeah, do you want to have a comment, or do you think, what do you think? How many of that 500 million eggs will survive?
Okay, I'm gonna guess 4.
4 is actually a very optimistic number. How about Xingyi? I think Xingyi wanted to also address this.
Yeah, also 4 because like some predictors are big, then one month they can maybe like go up 1 million.
Yeah. So I'm gonna just also toss the question to Tiana as well. Like, what do you think? Like 500 million. How many do you think will still survive after? How many?
8.
8. Samuel, you want to give a guess also?
Yes.
How many? How many?
4.
How many do you think? 4 also. Wow. 4 is a popular number, huh? There's a special number here. 4, 4, 4, 8. Well, let me tell you the answer. Actually, there's no correct or wrong answer, but it's just to share from my own experiences as well. In terms of actually seeing a decent sized giant clam that we see on our reefs today, it probably is the result of many different reproduction events, not just a single one. So even with a 500 million eggs being released and dispersed in the natural environment, the chances of their survival is very, very low. It's actually less than 1%. And if you do a little bit of math, less than 1, like say, so in my lab, like I think when we were looking at how many of them survive after being 1 year old, I think our numbers are, the percentage sounds very quite sad lah. 0.000, I think got 4 zeros after the decimal place, like 1. And when you think about it, it's really very little. So what I am hoping to do in my laboratory setting is that I provide an environment that is relatively predator free, and also a more stable environment and condition, so that the animals can survive at a slightly higher rate compared to what is in the wild. So I think it's just to sort of bring across the idea that every individual that we see in our Singapore shores, right, they are very special. They are basically like how I see them, as little warriors, because they really have to go through so much to survive and eventually settle down and grow into a decent size. So for them to also reach up to a 20 cm or 25 cm, they take years as well. It's up to 10, 20 years also. So hopefully you'll sort of gain that appreciation that it's not easy surviving in the marine environment. So although I'm talking about the giant clam, but it applies to many other organisms as well. Some of the other experts probably have shared a little bit also. So I want to sort of bring in or show us into one of the aspects about, let's talk a little bit more about giant clams in Singapore. So among the 4 of you, how many of you can you all tell me one question all of you all can answer? How many species of giant clams do we have now? So there's a bit of a different answer. How many species do we have now? So I see Justin already.
Is it 10?
Okay, that's the first number. I see Samuel also. How many species do we have?
5.
5. How about Tiana and Xingyi? How many species do you think we have? Make a guess. No guess. Very difficult.
10.
10. Tiana?
7.
7. So we have 10, 5, 7, and 10. So actually Samuel is the closest. So in just Singapore alone, we used to have 5 different species. And in fact, the most impressive species, which is the really big one, we also have them. Unfortunately, we no longer see them in the wild, but you can still catch glimpses of them in the Lee Kong Chian Natural History Museum, where some of the shells that were dug up from different parts of Singapore are now on display or part of the display in the Natural History Museum. So it's quite interesting because I myself go out to the field. I never get to see such a big one. But in fact, today, out of the 5 species that we used to have them, we only left with 2. So 2 out of 5, we are only left with 2 out of 5 of them. And just a very quick question. So because I just now hear some of y'all managed to go on intertidal walks, some of you want to go intertidal walks. Do y'all know where the giant clams are found in Singapore? How about Tiana? I think you were talking about, I think I remember you said you've gone to some intertidal. So where do you think giant clams can be found here in Singapore? I'll come over to you in a while, Cindy. Where you say?
I don't know.
Oh, you don't know. Okay. Not sure. You don't know where. Not the place that you gone to lah. No. Okay. How about so I see Cindy also. You wanna let us know? Or you wanna let us know what you think?
Maybe like shallow tropical coral reefs.
So where can you find shallow tropical reefs in Singapore? Samuel, you want to answer?
St. John Island.
St. John Island. Okay. Justin, where else can you find?
I think you can find just now you said Pulau Hantu also can.
That's right. Yeah, so some of you have so actually mostly in the southern part of Singapore. So there are many islands in Singapore. So example, St. John's, Pulau Hantu, then even Sentosa as well. That's one of the closest islands to us, but it's easily accessible. But they are a bit hard to find in Sentosa. So only some people know where to find them. So maybe it's a good thing also, because when there's less disturbance, people they can thrive better as well. So thanks, Lisa. I got the message. So just one last question for our panelists, and I'd like Justin to take it because I think you also raised your hands one or two times. Why do you think giant clams are important members of coral reefs?
I think they provide like they are part of the coral reefs, so they have, maybe because they are so big, they can provide shelter like fish maybe. Then
yes, that's definitely, yeah. Go on.
I think they help. No, that's not it. Well, I'm not sure. Maybe do they clean up like their like filters and stuff? Maybe.
Yeah. No, Justin. Actually, to be really honest, why different animals are important to coral reefs, we don't quite actually have all the answers as well. We are constantly learning as well, and the answers that you gave are exactly what we have in mind so far. They are so big, you can think of them like little HDBs, right? Our HDBs, we hang out around it, we live inside, we live outside, so they're a little bit like HDB and condominiums. So that's what I like to say. So, but for them, they host the little fish, they host the little crabs, they host the little animals that are around our reefs as well. And to some extent, they can filter or even clean some parts of the water, although that needs to be studied in a little bit more. I'd like to have the same question to the others as well. Maybe Tiana, would you like to make a guess, like why giant clams are important to coral reefs? So while we wait for Tiana to have a thought, I'd like to just see if Xingyi or Samuel would like to have a comment here for this last question.
They give shelter to fish and crab.
Yeah, that's right. What other animals do you think they can shelter also, apart from fish and crabs?
Prawn.
Yeah. And something that we sometimes don't realize, they actually can also shelter corals, sea snails as well. Because they are so big, right? They actually have the ability to hold some of the corals also.
Some of the little fishes and sea snakes or sea snails eat small pieces of the giant clam.
Would you like to have be the last one to have a last comment? Okay, all good, all good. So we are done for this particular session. I'd like to give a shout out to all our young panelists over here as well. Thank you so much for participating and enthusiastically as well with all your interesting responses and answers as well. So someone else gonna take over from me for now?
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Neo. Okay, thank you, Dr. Neo, Tiana, Xingyu, Justin, and Samuel. It is now time for Q&A. We will try our best to answer all the questions in the short time that we have. Thank you for your kind understanding if we are unable to answer all questions due to the time constraint. So, well, we have a few questions here at the moment. So let's take a look. Okay, Dr. Neo, do giant clams hold pearls inside of them? Yu Zhe is asking, yes.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And it's actually not as well known, but yes, they do have pearls, but not very nice looking ones. So the usual pearls that we have, our moms or even myself, I own, they are mostly freshwater based. They are formed by other species of shellfish, but in the giant clams, they can do the same thing as well. So when there is a particle that accidentally goes in, but it cannot come out of the animal, they would actually just stay inside the clam shell, and eventually the clam, what would they do is they would grow layers and layers over it, and with time you'll be able to see a pearl-like structure, but sometimes you only see it after they die, because you need to be able to open the full shell before you actually see the pearls itself as well.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Charlene is asking, how big is the pearl?
How big? The biggest one is really about the size of how do I put it? It's almost as big as a brain, actually, like an adult's brain size. So yeah, so that's pretty big. So it can weigh up to about 1 kilo to 2 kilos. That's the largest that they've seen, or that's the largest that they've found so far. But there could be others that are bigger, or could be others that are smaller than that.
Okay, good. The next question is, how do we know if the clam is dead?
Okay. How about anyone here? I'm gonna put it also to our panelists as well. How do you know if a clam is dead?
What if it opens up?
If it opens up, right? Yes, that's one part as well. So what is also missing inside?
Oh, the clam don't have the muscles inside.
That's right. So basically, if it's dead, what's left is only the shells, because that part doesn't break down so easily. But the flesh.
They float water when they are dead.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Good. So, well, another question is asked by Adina. How do you collect sperm and eggs of the giant clam?
So in the laboratory setting, we would basically use very fun, the household items, I would say. So the pails and buckets that you use for showering. We would basically just use those to scoop and collect as well. And what we do is we would separate them in different tanks, so that we know one tank is sperm, one tank is egg, and then we'll just do the merging and the fertilization at a later time.
Okay, good. Okay, so the last question from Charlene again is, how big are the eggs of the giant clams?
So I like to ask our young panelists, any guesses? How big do you think these eggs are? We talk about it that, it's very small, but how big exactly is it? Want to guess? It can even be like an example that you can think of. Is it like a rice grain?
That is
Pepper?
more like 100 micrometers.
Okay. So what is an analogy for 100 micrometer? How would you more easily explain to someone, like, sometimes 100 micrometer is a bit hard to visualize, right? So what would you all say? Samuel want to say something?
A frog egg.
Frog egg. Frog egg still quite big. How about another one?
0.1 mm.
0.1 mm. So 0.1 mm is like what?
So it's like the ruler. So you have the 1 cm, then you got the 0.1 cm. So then it's the 0.1 cm is 1/10 of the 0.1 cm. I don't know how else to say. Don't know why it's so small. So
I like to tell people that they are as small as a full stop. When you're writing your sentences, then you always have one full stop, right? It's about that size. So imagine 500 million of full stops there in the water. That's how much that we sometimes work with, or even less sometimes. Yeah. So hopefully that answers your question.
Wow, amazing. How many again? 500 million?
Yeah, that's what we heard from Singyi as well. Yeah. And
Wow.
I think
Justin want to ask a question, is it?
yeah, I want to ask the question.
Yeah.
So then after you collect the sperm and the eggs, then you put them together. Then after that, what happened? Do you like leave it in the tank? Don't you like return to the parent or something?
so it's very different for us. For us when we, at least for me, I give birth to my girl, I cannot put her just there. I have to take care of her. But unfortunately, many marine organisms that we have, parental care is very, very limited in a lot of these types of species. So what happens is that once they release, once they fertilize in the lab, they still have us to take care. So we take care of them. We would make sure the temperature is right. We would hopefully see them develop. They would hatch as well. They are also little eggs, hatch, and then we'll make sure, and hopefully they will develop over time. But in the natural environment, there's no such thing. So what happens is that they would just float in the water. They would find their own food. They would try and find their own microalgae so that they can photosynthesize. And eventually, really growing up on their own independently, and hoping that we all see the fruits of that reproduction as well. I see there is, sorry, back to you, Maddie.
Yeah, so I think that's all the time that we have at the moment. So thank you, Dr. Neo, for this very enlightening session. I've learned so much about giant clams today. I'm sure all of us here also have. But Xingyu is raising up her hand. Xingyu, you have a question, is it?
Is it true that like there's no two giant clams that has the same colors or pattern?
That's a very good question also. And that's something I'm still figuring out over the many years. There are some that implies that the patterns and the colors are like fingerprints, so we know that our fingerprints are very unique among individuals, except in twins. But I think there isn't enough to really be very sure that the patterns are completely unique among different individuals. So unless you get to see all the different giant clams in the world, then you'll be able to say that they are all very different or all not the same. But that's unfortunately that's my answer to you for now, whether they are really the same or not.
Thank you so much, Dr. Neo. So 3 things I've learned today is that giant clams can walk just like our garden snails. They have a very big foot under their shells and they can pull their body along and drag their shells with them. And then secondly, giant clams are hermaphrodites. They have the ability to produce both female eggs and male sperm. And so they release the eggs and sperms into the water during mating time. And lastly, we've documented 5 species of giant clams in Singapore, and we are only left with 2 out of 5 species of giant clams at the moment. And they can be found in St. John's Island, Pulau Hantu, and even in Sentosa. Okay, where in Sentosa? I think they're chilling out at Amara Resort. Yeah, so we would like to thank our young panelists, Tiana, Xingyu, Justin, and Samuel, who came on board today to share what they know. I'm sure all of us here has had a good experience too. I've enjoyed this session and we hope that you will continue to support the Nature Society. So let's take a look at the slides from NSS. So what does NSS do? So NSS does nature conservation and educational outreach to the public. Okay, so we do nature-based education, engage the public for the collection of data, write proposals, and engage the government. Okay, and the next slide. NSS is an NGO and it's run mostly on volunteers. And if you feel inclined to support our work specifically, we invite you to join us as members, and we also welcome donations of any amount. You can find out about us through our social media channels. Okay, for the next slide, that is Facebook, IG, Twitter, and on our NSS website. So once the restrictions are lifted, we look forward to meeting you in person at our nature activities. All right, and lastly, special thanks to all the marine scientists and biologists who came on board, particularly for this session with Dr. Neo. And thank you, Dr. Neo. Thank you so much for coming and joining us. Once again, we'd like to express our gratitude to everyone who made this event possible, to our young panelists, Tiana, Xingyu, Justin, and Samuel, and to our moderator, Dr. Neo, for sharing your knowledge with us today. We've now come to the end of the session, and on behalf of the speakers and everyone from the NSS Marine Conservation Group, thank you and enjoy the rest of your holiday. Our next session will be at 1 p.m. and we will be talking about sea turtles. We hope to see you later. Thank you so much. Can the panelists and the moderator please stay on because we would like to take a group photo.
Wait, does the giant clam have teeth?
Oh, sorry, Xingyu is asking a question, is it? Was there someone asking a question? So sorry.
Yeah, so I'm happy to take a question or two more if you can stay back, but yeah, see whether they have teeth.
Yeah.
They have a different kind of teeth.
What do they use for?
So they basically have what they call gills. But these gills don't look pretty. They function more like teeth, so they would filter plankton through it, and that's how they chew and swallow the plankton that they get from the water. So this I don't have a picture right now, but you know that there's these two openings of the clam, one very big one, one small one. So the bigger opening, you can think of it as the mouth, water goes in, and then the small one, the smaller outlet or smaller mouth is things that come out. So you can see it as a bit like our mouth and our back lah. So the mouth is where the gills are, and that's where the teeth is. But they're not sharp. They're not. So because they don't chew, what they do is they just take the water up as well. Yeah.
Yes, so I think, yeah, Xingyu, thank you so much for daring to ask that question. I love that. Awesome. Yeah. So if we're ready, I think that we will meet everyone else at 1 p.m. for the talk on sea turtles. So we'll see everyone else later. So for the panelists and the moderator, can you stay on so that there can be a group photo that can be taken?